Another week, another episode of Lost. This time we have the next episode focused on Sun and Jin's backstory. And I did just want to preemptively say that I know that I group those two together always because of how, usually connected they are on the island. It's not until later on that we start to get into, them separately. But what's interesting about kind of the back and forth is House of the Rising Sun was pretty much is that both of those episodes, I should say, House of the Rising Sun and this episode in translation, cover the same events but from different perspectives. So last episode that we covered back in September, House of the Rising Sun, covered it from Sun's perspective. This episode covers those events from Jin's perspective, so we get a little bit more context and the other side of events that we thought we were already familiar with. So, Luke, you got anything to say before we jump in?
No, only that I guess this is our first instance of Lost kind of wrapping around and making things make sense that you saw like 10 episodes before. So
See?
it is good stuff.
They do answer some of the mysteries. This is why that criticism has always been bullshit, as Chris has been telling me for years. All of that and more on today's episode of Talkin' Lost. Stay tuned. So what's interesting is we've gotten into we're getting into the latter half of this season, right? We've only got, after this episode, I think about 6 episodes left until we wrap season 1. Like I was saying the last couple of weeks, like we're going to do numbers next week, and then we're going to take a week off before we come back for the final 5 episodes in January. But it is interesting how, as we're wrapping it back around, as we're getting some some extra backstory, some more context on certain characters who we already saw their backstory of. Like I said, with the exception of Hurley next week, all of the characters we're going to get backstory for in January when we wrap the first season are going to be characters that we've already seen before, some a couple of times before. And what's interesting is how, obviously, like I said, we covered Charlie and Sawyer again the last 2 weeks and how we were getting like some more context, some extra added information that we didn't necessarily have, particularly on Sawyer. And that's part of what made last week's episode so good. And this week we're getting it on Jin and Sun, where we're first introduced to these two. We don't know that much about them. They're primarily keeping things separate. They don't speak any English. And now obviously we've had a couple of revelations since then. We know that Sun has the ability to speak English, but has been keeping that a secret from Jin for whatever reason. And we know that the reason for that is because of that's because Jin wasn't exactly the most forthcoming and honest person, let's say, at least as we saw it based off of that last episode, and like I said, and that goes for their time on the island as well, considering that Jin has mostly been about, protecting Sun almost to a fault. He comes off as a little bit controlling, a little bit violent, as he's been willing to pick a fight with Michael over some perceived afflictions that he may have towards Sun. And now we get the backstory of all that. We start to understand Jin a little bit more as a person, especially since that's another thing that we've been talking about is that throughout all these events that have been happening over the last couple of episodes, there's been a lot of shit that's happening. We've constantly been like, where's Jin? Where's Jin? And this is the episode that starts to fold him back into the main action. Like from this point forward, Sin and wow, say that 10 times fast. Sun and Jin are crucial members of the Lost ensemble going forward, and I will say this: there's a reason why these are some of the characters that make it all the way through to the end. Because, like I said, these two end up, while not necessarily being as important to the island, these two do have some crucially important parts to play going forward. So what are your thoughts? How does this change your perspective on these two?
Yeah, because for a long time, like both of them weren't in the show. Jin was clearly off just fishing, but now that we do get them back into the fold, it's just nice. Like it's a great cast of characters, and having these pairs interact with each other. One episode is going to be him, this and this character. One episode this and this. So bringing Jin into the mix with all of them, it just makes for more fresh content. I don't know. It's not content, but it's just. Keeps the show fresh.
Like don't degrade Lost by lumping that in with the content pile.
It is great.
We save that for the dribble that we get in 2024, not for old stuff. Yeah. It's actually good. Oh man, but
it just keeps the flow of the show going.
Pun intended. I see what you did there.
There was a pun intended. What was the pun intended?
Flow, the movie.
Oh, well, I saw that like months ago. It's
That's
not
right. That's
relevant.
right. I still haven't seen it, and you're actually gonna be really, really disappointed to me. There's a build up to that, but I'm getting to that in a little bit. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Like I said, the pairings are what's really interesting, and the dynamics that have been established. Like I said, we've gotten to know these characters pretty well by this point, but obviously we're still learning more about them. And obviously, like I said, the whole Michael, Son, Jin, not triangle, but back and forth is definitely a source of contention for this first season as well. You know, considering that, like I said, Jin being obviously a little bit more traditional, obviously that means that he's going to be a little bit extra protective of his wife, especially when he sees her communicating with Michael in a way that, you know, may or may not be, you know, flirtatious, at least from his perspective. And obviously, like I said, Sun had the revelation that she couldn't speak English, which Kate figured out first, then Michael did. Then then this episode, some things happened that forced her to reveal it to the rest of the castaways. And yeah, and obviously this episode gets kind of sort of into the root of the backstory of why she was keeping that a secret. Obviously, you know, if we're getting into the backstory here, we knew based off House of the Rising Sun that Jin worked for Sun's father, who is not a good man, not a nice man. In fact, he was a car dealer and also major gangster who had a major chokehold in a lot of different industries. And in this episode, it's obviously revealed that in order to be able to gain, in order to be able to marry Sun, who he loved very dearly, he was forced to work for her father and do maybe some not nice things that maybe went against his own personal code. It also showed that he had more of a working class background as opposed to Sun, who was raised in this life of luxury. His father was a fisherman, and obviously it's something that it's not that well, it starts out he is ashamed of that backstory. Of where he came from, but over time it's revealed that he may be more altruistic than we gave him credit for, considering the fact that he's definitely trying to keep his father protected from whatever ramifications could happen of him getting involved in this life, and kind of the things that he was willing to give up for Sun. And that's kind of what makes him so interesting, is that, again, he was kind of this, you know, one-note, stickly, very prickly character, and this episode is the one that reveals that no, he does have layers, is that he literally gave up what could have his own happiness, essentially, for Sun. And so the fact that now he feels like she has, now the fact that he feels like she is not reciprocating that, it makes him it makes him feel, it's that classic feeling of what happens when guys find themselves in this situation where they feel like their feelings and the things that they are giving up for a relationship are not being reciprocated. And once again, it's quite interesting how Lindelof is able to kind of pull those bits and pieces of regular everyday struggle and kind of place them in this castaway Lord of the Flies situation. It's actually funny too, because this is the first episode
And he name drops it.
Yeah, where we actually get a name drop of that too, where Sawyer name drops Lord of the Flies in there. So that's kind of what's so interesting about Jin, and we finally have that extra context. So much so that by the time the episode ends, we see him doing the last thing that we thought would happen, which is helping Michael rebuild the raft. Because obviously the centerpiece of this episode, kind of the central conflict on the island, if you will, is that the raft that Michael has been working so fastidiously on.
That's pretty impressive. Like, damn, this is a whole, like,
yeah,
Titanic type thing.
He was making a lot of progress on it.
I thought it was going to be a Tom Hanks Castaway type situation.
Yeah.
But no, he's got, like, the parts from the plane. Like, yeah.
Fuselage,
and then
bamboo,
it burned, and it got burned.
Wire, yeah, and it gets burned, literally. No, Michael was making a lot of progress on that raft, and yeah, they wake up one night and it's poof, up in smoke, and naturally, because of their contentious rivalry that's going on, kind of the inciting incident is that Jin catches Sun on the beach in a bikini, and naturally, him being a more conservative mind tries to cover it up. The other survivors get involved. Michael tries to get him to back off, and of course, Sun's forced to slap Michael in order to protect him from Jin. And yeah, that's kind of what sets it off. Next thing you know, the raft gets burned. Everybody suspects Jin. And I didn't, not for a second. And it's funny because, like, throughout the episode, like I said, I'm like, oh yeah, this is the raft burning episode. Like, I remembered it from the first time I watched it, but then of course throughout I'm like, okay, I know it's not Jin. Both because A, I remember it wasn't Jin, and B, because obviously that's the bait and switch of the episode, is they want you to think it was him, especially once they see that his hands are burned. I'm like, oh, just from a storytelling perspective, I'm like, I've seen this before. This is the classic bait and switch. They want you to think that it's him, but it's not actually. It's going to be somebody else. And I was trying to remember if it was Locke or Walt, because you've also got like the what's it called? Because you've also got, like, the subplot of Saeed and Shannon, which I'm like, the less said about that, the better, because I love Saeed so much. But
about time. We got the kiss. Let's just move on.
Not even just that. It's just the fact that Saeed is such an awesome character, and Shannon just isn't. And I forget, and it's so funny how obviously it's one of those things where knowing where the show goes and where the character is kind of evolved to, and then but then certain things that in the first season, which for the most part has been pretty impeccable so far, just certain things that come up and you're just like, oh yeah, I forgot that was the thing. Unfortunately,
I will say I thought that the raft burning was either Locke or one of the others. That was my first.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
Locke wants to keep them on the island.
Well, and then there's the moment, obviously, at the end after the final confrontation when Locke comes up to them and is like, yeah, we're fighting all amongst each other, but we seem to have forgotten pretty quickly that there are other people on this island who have infiltrated us, who want to separate and divide us, who very easily could be responsible for this. And obviously, he's already figured out that it's Walt, and he wants to divert attention and create peace and unify the survivors so that they can be ready for potentially anything that comes next. But yeah, what's it called? Suspecting the others is pretty good, especially again, it's only been 2 episodes since they killed Ethan, and they moved on pretty fast from from the fact that again, Ethan, there's no way that Ethan was operating alone, so they seem to have forgotten pretty quickly about the others. But then don't worry, they are still lurking in the background. They will make their return. But it is quite interesting how, again, us as students of media, where something may be, where something may be, not as obvious to the more casual viewer, to us, we're like, oh yeah, that wasn't Jin. Yeah. Like that was pretty obvious. It was necessary character development and plot, but they're like, yeah, this is not Jin. So
I can't guess a plot twist to save my life, but I can guess these kind of things.
It's story structure and tropes versus plot twist is it. And when you've watched as many things as we have, it becomes pretty obvious over time. Let's call it. So obviously everybody suspects Jin. Sun catches Jin with his hands burned back at the cave. She immediately suspects him. More Sayid and Shannon nonsense. Although there is an interesting moment where Shannon does talk to Locke, and Locke is like, yeah, why do you care so much about what Boone thinks? If you want to be with Sayid, be with Sayid. Like, if you're only having this reaction because you want his attention, and it's like, why? Why does that matter at all?
Locke always knows what to say.
Locke always
steps in and is the MVP of every episode.
But I love how even Locke seems to have this self-awareness about just how annoying and pointless of a character Shannon is, where he's almost in a way kind of being like, yeah, why are you here? You're just nothing but a distraction. It's just funny how we're even at the point where even the characters are dogpiling on Shannon because of how useless she is, except for Sayid, which again, I'm like, Sayid, why? I get it, like, you have this mutual respect for Kate, but like, Kate's standing right there and she's 1,000 times more efficient of a character than Shannon is, but I digress. So Jin goes off into the woods, gets kidnapped by Sawyer, who also was paying for his spot on the raft by contributing materials to Michael. So naturally, he's just as pissed as Michael is, if not more pissed at Jin for suspecting him burning down the raft, drags him out onto the beach, throws him in front of the survivors. They end up in, like you said, this is a Lord of the Flies situation now. Him and Michael end up fighting it out. It even gets to the point where Sayid is like, yeah, they need to settle this themselves. Like, this has gotten a little bit too far. There's no other way to settle this. Jin's talking some shit in Korean. Michael's hitting him nonstop. And Sun finally is forced to step in. Finally reveals that she speaks English to everybody else. And everybody is naturally, obviously, very suspicious. So, like, why'd you wait until this long to tell us? And he's like, and even Sawyer, once again, brings up the very valid point of, it's like, how do we know we can trust her? It's very clear that her husband didn't even know that she spoke English. So I just thought that was another little bit of good little self-awareness that was thrown in there. Yeah. And obviously,
it's one of those kind of things, like, that we knew, like, it's going to happen at some point.
Yes.
But when? It's like Walter White being found out. Like, it was going to happen.
It was going to happen.
Had to wait for it.
Yeah, we just had to wait for a while. It's interesting because I'm watching The Americans right now, which is another excellent show. And the whole kind of bit that incites it off is that the two main characters, Philip and Elizabeth Jennings, portrayed by Matthew Rhys and Kerry Russell, are both Soviet spies embedded within the U.S. And of course, a natural point of conflict is in 80s Reagan America. Where did they decide to move into in Maryland? Next door to an FBI agent. So naturally, you know that, okay, at a certain point, the FBI agent is gonna figure out that his two next door neighbors are Soviet Russia spies. Like, it's not a matter of if. They're gonna find out. It's just a matter of when. So you see these sorts of plot points that are thrown into these shows all the time. So obviously, again, getting more so into Jin's backstory, the big point of contention for Jin is that he's constantly torn between trying to provide the life for Sun that he wants versus constantly being at Sun's father's beck and call. And the big thing comes, the reason as to why, Sun caught him with blood on his hands one night is that he was, of course, making one of many so-called visits to some environmental defense minister that was in the employ or being paid off by Sun's father. And he was sent to deliver the message.
He was doing his job.
Yeah, he was doing his job. Yeah, but he didn't actually kill anyone.
The other guy wasn't doing his job. The other guy, so he needed to be paid a visit.
Yeah, he needed to pay him a visit and voice Sun's father's displeasure. And of course, he clearly didn't understand what he was supposed to be doing the first time. So naturally, Sun's father was like, "All right, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna go to this guy's house in the middle of the night. You're gonna bring this guy with you." And he's gonna show you how to deliver a message. And that's when Jin finally understands what it is that he has to be doing. So he goes in, beats up the guy before the other guy has a chance to kill him, comes home, is washing the blood off his hands. Sun catches him, tries to confront him, and he's immediately like, "I'm just trying to provide the life that it is that you always wanted." And then it ends with him going to find his father, who he's been telling everybody has been dead at this point. His father's revealed to be alive. He has this conversation with him, basically saying, like, "I don't know what to do. I'm torn because her father's clearly an evil man and not good guy, but she sees me as the bad guy, because she sees me as having to do all the dirty work that she's never actually had to see her father do." And his dad, and now he's like, and we also get a little name drop as the reason as to why they were on the plane as well, where obviously we knew that Sun was planning on leaving Jin at the airport, and Jin, was carrying out missions for her father, both in Sydney and then Los Angeles, which is why they were on the Oceanic Flight 815. And his father tells him, it's like, "Look, take the chance. Get out. Save your marriage. You still have the chance. You're going to be in LA. How can her father touch you there?" Clearly not understanding just the wealth and influence that her father has, but that they'll cover at a later date. That gets covered in another backstory episode. I don't remember if it's season 2 or 3. But yeah, so now we know why they were on the plane. And like I said, it's one of those things where, again, the best lost storylines are the ones that tie directly between their backstory and kind of why they're on the island. We saw that last week with Sawyer and when he was in Australia to kill the guy who we thought was the guy that ruined his life. And ended up meeting with Jack's father. And then now we see it with Jin and Sun, where Jin and Sun, they were both trying to escape. They were both trying to get out just from different things. Jin was trying to get them both out from her father, and Sun was trying to escape this life of violence that she thought that she was getting herself into, that when she didn't realize what Jin was. Communication in marriages and lack thereof. We love to see that nothing has changed in 20 years. Yeah, so that was just a little jokey joke that I had to throw in there. But like I said, it ends with, like I said, this pact of trust has irrevocably been broken since Sun reveals to Jin in an attempt to get him to say that she was going to leave him, and Jin's like, "Yeah, I'm not dealing with this anymore." She's like, he's like, if I'm going to, he's like, if everybody's gonna hate me, then I'm at least gonna show that I can at least be trustworthy. And we see that at the end when he starts to help Michael reconstruct the raft. And then, of course, that leads us to our final moment. Like I said, Locke has diffused the tension by once again revealing the presence of the others and drawing attention off Jin. But, of course, Locke being, as of right now, still the smartest guy on the island, immediately figures out that Walt was responsible for it. And is like, "Yeah, why'd you burn the raft, Walt?" And I need your take as far as whether this is like, okay, he's a precocious kid, whatever. But burning down a raft that was clearly like, and this is one of those things where I'm like, oh, this is kind of just TV writing. I don't know how this accurately reflects well. Because, like, I get that they're setting up Walt to be, at least in this point of the show, they're setting up Walt to be, like, this, like, very special character that's going to be, like, very crucial to the island going forward. But obviously knowing where we go with Walt and the fact that, like, he wants to stay on the island because he feels this connection. Okay, that's fine. But the explanation they gave is like, I've moved around a lot since I was a kid. I don't want to move around anymore. That's one of those things where I'm like, oh.
Yeah, immediately I was thinking like, okay, he didn't want to go on the raft because he thinks the raft's going to tip over and he doesn't want to drown in the,
even
in
something
the ocean.
Like that would make sense.
And then he says that, I'm like,
maybe
not. But
that's one of those things where
it was minor enough that
that's one of those things where Lost where they couldn't decide. They're like, okay, do we go with the precocious kid route, or we're clearly setting this kid up as a prophet of some kind? Like, or do we go with that? Like, this, we set up this kid. He has some sort of supernatural powers. He has visions, whatever. He can make birds magically kill themselves. But, like, why couldn't... I'd understand if he, like, felt weird, but, like, he's talking to Locke, of all people. If anybody on that island is going to understand that sort of supernatural something, it's going to be Locke. So the fact that Walt doesn't even feel the need to tell him, I'm like, okay, that's a little bit of, like, you know, that's a classic TV answer, you know. That's not kind of the bar of quality that we expect from Lost. So that was the only one where I'm like, oh, now I know why I forgot it, because Walt gave the dumbest fucking kid response you could possibly think of when it comes to these sort of things. Like, oh, I don't want to move around anymore. Motherfucker, you're on a deserted island. Like, come on. I get that you're like, you know, the adults are doing a good job of, like, keeping everything hunky-dory, but I think you've seen at this point that, like, we've literally seen people get kidnapped, killed. You were literally in a goddamn plane crash. I get it that you're, like, clearly blocking out the trauma of some kind. You know, there's all sorts of crazy supernatural shit. You've almost been attacked by a goddamn polar bear. Like, that's one of those things where it's like, come on, man. Just, like, baseboard logic. Don't talk to us like we're idiots, you know, as far as...
And even Locke's reaction is like, yeah,
come
sure,
on,
kid.
man.
But I like it here, too. But
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. Not my favorite piece of Lost writing, but...
Yeah. I love how even the episode was like, yeah, we got to cut out on this. Like, this is not good. This is not good at all. So... oh, man. But otherwise, a solid episode. Pretty solid episode. And like I said, next week, which is our midpoint finale, although we only have 5 episodes left once we come back in January. Next week is Numbers, which is, I've been waiting for this. The next major piece of Lost lore we're going to get next week. Like I said, we got the Hatch. We got the others. We met Russo. Now we're on to the Numbers, which, if I'm not mistaken, are the last piece of Lost lore that we get this season before we get into the final episodes, which is when things really start to hit the wrap. So
another moment I wanted to highlight.
Yes.
I was waiting for this payoff. Like Hurley listening to his music. Look, I'm not old enough to know what that thing is called that he's listening to.
The what's it called, the disc player. It's just a CD player.
Like, I guess so. But it finally ran out of battery. I was waiting for it.
Yep.
Like when is
Yes,
it gonna
it
happen?
did.
And it finally did. So
Yes, it
kudos to them for that detail.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was pretty fun. Yeah, it's so fun. Oh wow, you're aging me a lot, because I remember there were kids that still had that when I was in high school. So wow, wait, you don't even know what that is. Oh my god, wow.
I know what an iPod is. I know what an iPod is.
Well, iPod, yeah, but like, let me put it, the iPod came out like when I was 8. So like, I remember like when the iPod first like became a thing. So, oh man, really starting to make me feel my age here, man.
Well, I know what a Walkman is from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Well, yeah, Walkman, but that's different. Like, I
don't know the in the middle.
I
between Walkman and iPod.
I didn't even have that when I was a kid. Like, people long since moved on past that. Like, that's like what people like my parents' age had. That's what they had. But
there's a blank area of
Yes.
movies and TV shows I haven't watched enough that cover that.
You're like Gandalf in that. You're like Gandalf in that section. You're like, I have no memory of this place. But real quick, I just wanted to cover some movies. Oh man, Luke, I don't know about you. This December has been the worst fucking December in a long time for movies. It tracks, right? After the worst year of movies in my lifetime. And we end with December, which is usually a pretty awesome month for movies, because that's when we get like the last of the Oscar movies that drop before award season happens.
And we get like one mega blockbuster, but
yeah,
not this year.
And this year, well, first of all, this is the weekend that Kraven the Hunter opened up, which I did not see, because again, I made the conscious effort. I'm like, yeah, I'm done with these bullshit Sony Spider-Man movies, that Spider-Man spin-off movies that don't have Spider-Man in them. I skipped Madam Web, I skipped Venom: The Last Dance, and I'm skipping Kraven the Hunter. And based off the critical reaction that this movie got this past weekend, it's once again apparent that I made the right choice, because good lord, some of the clips that I saw. First of all, the fact that the entire movie leaked the Thursday, not the Friday or the Saturday, the Thursday that it opened, and the fact that, do you know why they call me the Rhino, has already become a meme. Like, already I've shown that I made the right decision. But so far, I've watched Y2K and Lord of the Rings: War of the Rohirrim, and both of those movies I can say right now are in my worst of the year, because wow, just what a letdown both of those movies were. How do you screw up an anime Lord of the Rings? People have been only making anime-style Lord of the Rings for a while. You can make the argument that Ralph Bakshi's original Lord of the Rings incorporates certain elements of... Like, how do you screw this up? This movie was boring, trite, The animation looked cheap. The action sequences couldn't even work. The deaths that happened were predictable. You saw them happening from 14 miles away. Yeah, it was really, really lame. And then Y2K.
I keep trying to make Lord of the Rings happen when like it already happened 20 years ago.
Yeah. Talk about something that just, man, they're just dragging an IP out and none of them are good. The Hobbit wasn't good. The Amazon TV show hasn't been good. This anime movie wasn't good. Like, seriously, just give up. Just give up. Like at the very least, the whole impetus for the show was that you were going to see the adaptation of the Silmarillion in the Second Age and the forging of the rings that you saw in the preamble for the movies. And they can't even get that right. And
Take all the money you're giving to Rings of Power and give it to Brandon Sanderson.
Seriously.
So you can make Mistborn.
Seriously.
Or Stormlight Archive.
Seriously. And then as for Y2K, yeah, all the best jokes are in the trailer, but you've got a wannabe super bad ripoff that also mixes in a robot apocalypse. And your 3 leads that you cast are Jaden Martell, who has never been good in anything, Rachel Zegler, who has sort of never been good in anything, and Julian Dennison, who has been sort of entertaining in some things. And you have a movie where all the jokes and the best moments are all focused in one sequence. Certain characters are killed off earlier than expected, and the best that plays out is like as a gotcha moment. And yeah, the rest of the movie is kind of just boring and predictable. I'm like, you have a movie about Y2K and a robot apocalypse. How the hell are you screwing this up? So yeah, it's just been disappointment. I did want to give a shout out to one movie that I did see that was a major surprise that I actually did quite enjoy. It's called The Order. It's based off a book and certain real-life events about an FBI agent that broke up a major neo-Nazi ring that was attempting to plan an armed resurrection in early 80s West Coast era Washington. It employs a very heat-like structure where Jude Law is the hard-boiled FBI agent and Nicholas Hoult is the leader of the neo-Nazi cult, but it features the most terrifying performance from Nicholas Hoult that I have ever seen. Jude Law's great. It's really, really good. It's a great, like, tense crime thriller, cat and mouse game. The action is great. I heavily, heavily recommend that movie. And yeah, like I said, we've only got about 2 weeks left in 2.5 weeks left of the year. So, like I said, we got Brutalist, we got Nosferatu, we got Baby Girl left as far as the movies that I'm actually looking forward to. So I'll be watching all of those. I'll probably be doing a review of Nosferatu and Complete Unknown for the last Sunday of the month before we wrap. But in the meantime, Luke, you got any movies you want to talk about before we bounce?
I can say that I've stopped watching Yellow Jacket. It's just taking too long to do anything. Like I'm gonna watch other things. I watched today. I thought I wasn't gonna make an update to my top 10 until Nosferatu, but I watched Carry On Netflix.
All right. Yes, I've heard it's good.
It's a super lukewarm movie.
Yeah.
If you watch Die Hard every year at Christmas and you want something more, this is it. This is Ethan Hunt if he was a TSA agent. In his Taron Egerton versus Jason Bateman.
Yeah, that sounds like a good one. I'm excited to watch this one. I've heard good things.
And that's it for me. Nosferatu is the next one. I might see Sonic if I really want to.
I'm not seeing Sonic. I'm not seeing Mufasa. Yeah, I'm sorry. When I saw the blockbuster offerings that this year had, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm skipping it. Also, I'll save it until Avatar: Fire and Ash comes out next year. So.
Superman trailer, supposedly.
Superman trailer, hopefully this week. Hopefully, fingers crossed this week. We're finally going to see what Gunn is capable of. Which, by the way, have you been watching Creature Commandos?
I haven't watched the third one, but I watched the first two.
It's very good. It's gotten very, very... It kind of pulled like a Peacemaker. Where remember, those first couple episodes of Peacemaker were really good, but there was a point where you're like, where is this going to go? But then it kept getting better with each episode. Creature Commandos is doing that. This third episode took some twists that I was not expecting at all. And he's doing that thing where, again, he introduced all the characters.
It's Guardians of the Galaxy for the seventh time.
Very much like Guardians of the Galaxy Suicide Squad, but he's once again giving you the backs. But the reason why I like when he does that in the TV format is because it gives you the backstory on each character within each episode in a way that he's really not able to do in the movies. And once you get into the tragic backstory of these characters, it's a combination of really funny but also really tragic. And this episode was G.I. Robot, and yeah, it was really, really good.
I really liked the Frankenstein and Bride.
That was really good.
Stuff,
that was really good.
I'm gonna get to the third one. Maybe today, actually.
Yeah,
I just forgot to.
Definitely recommend it. Like I said, it sucks because it came out so late in the year, and so it feels like everything the year is kind of done, but it is definitely still worth watching. So it's very, very much Gunn. And I understand if you're like tired of his style and you feel like he's been doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah, he has technically, but for me, like, I love his writing. I love his character work so much that I'm like, yeah, you could do like 13 more versions of this Guardians of the Galaxy style that you did with the Suicide Squad. Now you're doing with this, and I wouldn't care because it's still great. The characters are still great. The voiceover talent is still hilarious, and it's really good. Also, Frank Grillo is awesome. I think he's even better Rick Flag than Joel Kinnaman was. But although the irony being that we're supposed to believe that Frank Grillo is Joel Kinnaman's father, and I think the two of them are only like 5 or 6 years apart in age. So I just think that's hilarious. But
Well, that's like Harrison Ford and Sean Connery being 12 years apart.
But the difference is that but here's the difference. The difference is that Sean Connery, even though he's only 12 years older, looks like he could be Harrison Ford's dad. Frank Grillo in real life does not look like he could be Joel Kinnaman's dad. I'm sorry. They look about the same age. So
different times.
Different times. All right, Luke, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
You should follow me at Luke Reviews on YouTube. Video soon loading at this point. We just got a new entry that I'm excited to talk about.
All right. Now
sorry, was it Apes? I think Apes got pushed out of the 10. So.
Wow, Apes was still in your top 10 all the way up to the point. Apes.
Look, Dom, it's a rough year.
It's been an awful. No, listen, I'm with you. I'm with you. Listen, you don't have to convince anybody. I'm the last person you have to convince. I've been saying this year has been awful since Dune 2, and so far this year has done nothing but prove me right. Worst fucking year for movies in my lifetime. All right, but you
worse
guys
than 2020. We got like 3 movies in 2020.
Oh yeah. Because think about it this way, right? 2020, because by virtue of no movies and by virtue of we had to take what we could get, movies were either going to be really good or really bad. Not like this year. This year, every single movie, even the movies I was even a little bit remotely excited for, that I'm like, oh, this could be interesting. Even those proved to be disappointing. Like, at the very least, like, in 2020, like, we knew that some movies were going to be good. We knew Tenet was going to be good. We knew Defy Bloods was going to be good. We knew Chicago 7, Mank, Soul. We had, like, a few movies that we knew were going to be good. It was just a matter of we just didn't know if we were getting them, and then they all went to streaming. And then there were a few other surprises that managed to sneak their way in there. You know, like Invisible Man earlier on in the year. I still did enjoy Birds of Prey, even though it wasn't, like, one of the best ones. So, yeah, 2020, there were still some good movies and some to look forward to. Here, almost every single movie that I was looking forward to has been terrible. So, yeah, really, really hoping that, like, it's this year is bad when I'm even worried about Nosferatu. Like, that's how awful this year has been. Oh, man.
We'll cover the decade in the top 10.
Yeah, well, we're going to cover that in the top 10 and my quibbles with this decade so far. So that one's going to be a good video to look forward to. So with that being said, you guys can follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, at Official Talkin TV Podcast across all platforms. Subscribe if you're watching to us on YouTube. You guys know the drill. And as always, people, 12 seasons is a short film, and get lost. We'll see you guys next time. I'm going to start using that from now on. That's a fun one.